What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Always happy to see you guys here, and welcome back to my Mission Impossible film review series with Mission Impossible 2. This makes its 25th anniversary this year for this film. Released in 2000, this one sees Ethan Hunt team up with a professional jewel thief to secure a biological weapon called the Chimera virus, before rogue agent Sean Ambrose and his team gets a hold of it for their own twisted and deadly intent. So this one was the first one I've ever seen. It was the first one I was introduced to. Of course, it was back in 2000, so only this one and the original existed at the time. But this one was the very first one I've seen, and I remember at the time I was extremely impressed and mesmerized. This one was directed by John Woo, the Dove guy, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit later, who's a great filmmaker I deeply respect, despite my little nitpicks with this particular entry with his Mission Impossible 2. He's a director that I still respect. This one, I do admit, even though it does take a more action-eccentric take, especially after that first original film, this one does go a little bit over the top, a little bit out there. It's far from perfect, but me being an action junkie is a little bit of a step up. It just depends on who you are. If you like that more grounded tone and feel that the first one was, all power to you. But it just, like I said, it just depends on who you are, and this one definitely does step up with the action, but a little bit too much, which again I'll get into here in a little bit. Starting off with the positives for Mission Impossible 2, again, this is more action eccentric, and because I'm such an action junkie, I'm such a bigger fan of the action side of things than the espionage. Of course, this was going to go in the positives. It is more action eccentric, it is more action driven, and it pretty much showcased its place in the action genre for this series. And leave it to John Woo to do that. You'll leave it to him to place this series where it's intending to be. But yeah, it definitely gets away from that espionage mystery type drama that the first one had. Here you do get a little bit of a faster paced film, a little bit more of that edge of your seat type feel, though it does get a little bit more ridiculous as the film goes on in some areas, but it was still right up my alley. I'm not saying that the first one sucked because of that. There are moments in that first film that was still enjoyable to me, but I'm just saying the action side of things is where I lean on to. Where that first film failed for me, it just didn't work for me, to where the action side of something like Mission Impossible 2 does. And that's why it just didn't really work for me with that first film in terms of the action side that this one brought. Tom Cruise once again delivered. He brought that same persona and that same charm about him that he very cleverly created in that first film for this character. And I was going to mention this in that first film's review, but I didn't. But he's an acquired taste. He's not for everybody. Just ask my mother. She's not a fan. But he was pretty cool here. He brings the noise, and since the action is revved up a little bit in this, you get sort of an action hero icon, to where in the first film, he's just described as this agent that's trying to figure stuff out. But in this one, because the way he's presented and with the action being revved up and stuff, he kind of comes off as sort of like I wouldn't quite call it a cliche, but he comes off as one of those action heroes, sort of like Van Damme from Hard Target. I don't know about you, but that's kind of the vibe that I get, even though he's playing a completely different character than what Van Damme did in that film. Still, he kind of comes off as your basic action hero that Van Damme and Steven Seagal and Bruce Willis and all of those action alumni had played back in the 90s. He kind of comes off more like that in this than any of the other entries. But I like that about it. I thought he did that pretty well. I thought it suited him for this entry. Especially with that long hairdo, which I thought was kind of weird. I didn't know whether to put that in a mixed or a negative or what, but what the hell. I mean, for this entry and for the time, I guess, that this film came out, I guess that makes sense. Plus, you have all the stunts, and of course, again, like I said in that first film's review, this was before he went all out with his stunts. But the two main ones, and I'm going to be mentioning the main stunts that he does throughout this whole entire film review series, because he does like that one miraculous or 2 miraculous stunts in each of these every time. So you'll be hearing some more of this. But for Mission Impossible 2, I thought the 2 stunts that stood out the most was right when the film starts, right when you get introduced to him, he's climbing this mountain, basically this rock mountain. And I thought that was pretty cool. It had those tensified moments where he's just hanging on by a thread, literally, by his arms. And the whole bike scene at the end, where right before he fights the main villain, I thought was pretty cool, where he just goes up in the air and then they just clash. Yeah, so those are those stunts. Those are the stunts for Mission Impossible 2. And you get a bigger story here. Like I said, with the first film, it was more grounded. It was more about the espionage stuff. But like I said for that one, it just, the stories grows as each sequel had come out. So for Mission Impossible 2, you basically get Ethan Hunt, who teams up with this master thief, and they try to secure this biological weapon, this virus called Chimera. And there's this whole lore behind it, which I thought was pretty cool as well, that they say in like just a little narrative spot in the middle of this film. Now that the year is 2025, if they'd have made this movie now, it probably would have been about COVID. I guarantee you. But this is 2025, so moving on. Seriously though, you have a bigger story here, and it's more on sort of an atomic level, where you get this virus and the bad guys, the villains here, wants to use it for their own personal gain to make money, as what all villains tries to do for their own selfish game. And I thought it was just a bigger story, and it fit, and I thought it was really cool. I thought it was really intriguing and really exciting and really interesting. Alright, moving on to my mixed, and this is where a lot of people get divisive. So many others has put this in their negative, but I'm one of those that's always been more lenient. Not that I'm saying that there are certain elements to the action that could have been toned down just a little bit. They do go overboard a lot. But there are other segments to the action to where I really enjoyed. Like I said, after that first film, which is not really for me because the whole espionage grounded type stuff, I've always leaned more towards the action side of things than that. Which is why I can be a little bit more lenient, a little bit more understanding, and not as harsh. But like with Michael Bay, which is another director I really like, John Woo has this certain style about him. And I mentioned Doves before, which he does that in like 90% of his films, like every single time. His love of doves is so clear that you always have this scene to where, whether it's a slow-mo shot, which it usually is, or just a fast-paced shot, where you always see doves in the background. And here, that's clear as well. He just has that certain action style that I really enjoy. I really do enjoy. Though it can get a little over the top, a little overwhelming at times. I really do enjoy his style of action. I mean, him and Michael Bay are different styles, but they're close. But John Woo does tend to go a little bit over the top, a little bit ridiculous, especially for Mission Impossible 2. Because as ridiculous as this may seem, I enjoy a little bit of ridiculousness every now and then. Notice I said a little. Unlike most others I've seen that had this pretty much in their negatives, it doesn't really bother me as much. I mean, at one point it kind of did, but it's grown to me. And especially after all the Michael Bay and all the other John Woo films I've seen, this one, yeah, I can stand it. Just a little bit more. I can stand it. But basically what worked for me, and I may be repeating myself a little, I apologize if I am, but it just worked for me a little bit better than most. The style and the way that John Woo handles action scenes and just shot by shots, it doesn't really bother me as much. I actually do find enjoyment in those. I do remember the first time I reviewed these, which was a long time ago, it was a little bit more grueling to me, but they've just grown to me. They've grown on me since then. And it's just something that doesn't really disturb me. It's not something that pisses me off as much. As I said, Woo just has this style about him that I find very intriguing and unique, and I just find it more enjoyable than most. However, I'll be the first one to say that for Mission Impossible 2, he does go a little overboard. There's no denying that. As much as I already praised how much the action is, the reason why this is in the mix, is I do admit, I'll be the first one to say, that yes, he does get over the top, he does get ridiculous. The different shots and the slow motions to where you see characters do certain things over and over again, only from different shots and different angles. And I'm like, move on with it. You're pointing the gun at a certain way, and then you just keep on seeing them do like this. And after a certain amount of time, it just does get a little bit like nails on a chalkboard. So yes, I do admit that those portions of the film did annoy me. The massively overuse of slow-mo combined with shot-by-shot angles of characters doing the same thing only from different angles over and over and over again. It almost got to the point to where if this film was being shot normally and by anybody else, while still having action in it, if it was done in the same pacing but without all that slow-mo and all that over-the-top ridiculousness, the film probably would have ran about 45 minutes to an hour minus its 2-hour run. It does overstay its welcome. That I do 100% agree. But I'd be lying if I said that I didn't enjoy some of it, because I did. It does get a little grueling at times. Moving on to my negatives, and I only have two. I didn't think the relationship between Tom Cruise and Thandiwe Newton was all that interesting. Mostly because I never really thought of Newton being the proper fit for this film, for the Ethan character. Nothing against Newton. I think she's great in the other stuff that I've seen her in. It's just something about her character, something about that dynamic that just never really worked for me. It's something I can't quite put my finger on. I just think she was miscast in a way. Now, if they'd have got somebody like Linda Hamilton, like if she would have brought her Sarah Connor from T2 role to this film and teamed her up with Ethan instead, that probably would have worked a little better for me personally. Again, nothing against Newton. I think she's a great actress, but I don't know, just something about her just didn't quite land with me even to this day. As many times as I've watched this film, that was the one element that has never changed in my mind. That has just never really felt right. But if somebody like Sarah Connor or like Linda Hamilton, if they'd have brought somebody like her in, it probably would have, I wouldn't even mention this in the negatives. And lastly, I didn't really like the main villain in Sean Ambrose, played by Dougray Scott. Again, another actor that I really admire. I've seen plenty of his work. But I've always found his character in this film to be a little whiny, a little, I don't know, temper tantrum-ish. Even though he doesn't really throw temper tantrums, it just, his persona and just the way that he comes off, it never really intimidated me. He never really was anybody that I really rooted for as a villain. Again, nothing against Dougray Scott. He's great. But again, just like with Thandiwe Newton, something about him just doesn't really add up. And he's just one of those that was kind of like weak. Now, I'll say this about a villain in one of the future installments, so don't be surprised there. But yeah, you hit, you miss, and sometimes you miss more than hit. Just somebody that I was never able to take too seriously, and that was a little bit of a disappointing factor. Now, if Dougray Scott was to play that part today, then that would be a little different. Like back then, he was younger, so he had that high-pitched voice. Maybe that's the reason why. You know, I was watching this, especially for this review, I was trying to pinpoint what it is that I just didn't quite get behind this character for. That might be it. Again, not his fault. We were all young back then, and we all have different voices. But if he was actually able to play it right now, if he was to play the same exact character now that he's older, I think he would probably pull it off a little bit better. Just a little bit more intimidating. But don't hold me to that. That's just my opinion. In total honesty, this film was fine. Comparable to the original film, I thought it was a little bit more of a step up, especially in terms of the pacing and tone and action. It is the one I usually start with. It is the one that I put in first, especially when I'm binge watching these things. Could it have stood being toned down just a little bit with how far they went with the action? Yeah. But it was still fine. I still had fun with it, especially me being an action junkie. It's just something that never really bothered me as much as most others. But it was still fun, and a happy accident. So Mission Impossible 2, what was your thoughts on this? Were you a fan of this entry? Do you prefer the more action-eccentric side of things? Are you somebody that enjoyed all the ridiculousness that this film brought out? Was this your favorite in the series, or was this something not for you? Was this something that you prefer to just leave out completely because of all the ridiculousness, and you just want to get on with the series completely every time you binge watch it? Leave me a comment down below. Give me your thoughts. Thank you so much, guys, for clicking here and watching this. I really do appreciate it. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. Make sure to click that bell icon so you don't miss a thing if you like what you see. And I will see you on the next one. Peace.